All right, wonderful. So thank you for joining us tonight for Trails Are in Trouble, WTA's member webinar. The session will be going until 7:30 tonight. It's great to see we've got folks joining us from all over the state who've been involved with WTA for a long time or a little time. It's great to see so many new folks joining us on this, so thank you for taking the time to do so. My name is Kindra Ramos. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Chief Program Officer here at Washington Trails Association. Our member webinar series is offered to our supporters as a chance to learn more about Washington Trails Association and what we're doing to ensure that there's trails for everyone forever. As you might not know, that over 50% of our funding, 56%, comes from folks just like you, WTA members and donors, some of whom are here today, our volunteers and our Trail Action Network participants. You're all key in really making everything that you learn about tonight happen. So huge thank you to all of you. A couple of quick housekeeping things. We're going to go ahead and we're going to spend about 30, 40 minutes here sharing some insights and updates, and then talking about sort of the federal funding and the Forest Service specifically and what that means to your hiking this summer and how you can help. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll have some opportunity for Q&A. We'll draw from the questions that were submitted earlier. Thanks for everybody who did. Lots of great questions came in. And you can also put questions in the chat if something pops up while we're talking. And while we probably won't be able to get to all the questions, we will have a follow-up email as well. And so we'll put some additional information in there. Full disclosure, we do not have all the answers, but we're continuing to get information all the time. So if we can't answer questions, we'll always be updating our blog, our hiking guide, and informing folks through our Trail Action Network. So there's lots of ways you can get additional information as you need it. All right. So with that, start with a little vibe check here. I know that there are lots of reasons that people join, but just to kind of get a sense of how are you feeling about the future of trails here in Washington? It's exciting to be at the start of the hiking season, but there's a lot of change this year and there's a lot of work to do. So we just want to kind of get a sense of how folks are doing. All right. Thank you all for taking just a minute to think about that, and we can go ahead and dive right in here. So tonight, I'm going to be joined by Andrea Imler, WTA's Advocacy Director, and Jen Gradisher, our Trails Program Director. And they're going to share with you some of the challenges facing trails and how WTA is working to ensure that we have a sustainable trail system that can stand the test of time. This is work that takes place not just on the ground, but all the way in our nation's capital, working with lawmakers to shape decisions around management, around budget. All of that directly impacts all of the trail hiking that you do every day. So we've got a great turnout here, and just kind of based on who's here, I'm going to take 2 seconds to tell you all a little bit about WTA and the work that we do. For those who are new to us, welcome and hello. Washington Trails Association is a nonprofit community of hikers that come together around a shared love of time and nature and a desire to give back to the places we love. WTA was started more than 50 years ago as a way for hikers to help hikers, and we've grown into the largest hiking nonprofit in the United States. We believe that people are really the key to creating sustainable solutions and trail systems and building a safe and welcoming recreation community. So with that in mind, WTA mobilizes hikers and everyone who loves the outdoors to explore, steward, and champion our public lands and trails. And we do that through a variety of ways. We help people explore the outdoors through our amazing website, WTA.org, and our Trailblazer app, which have kind of up-to-date hiking information through our trip reports and access to thousands of trails across Washington state. We help people steward these places by connecting them with volunteer opportunities to do trail work. We help people advocate through our Trail Action Network, really letting them raise their voices for the policies and funding that really support our state lands. And because of all of that, we're able to really work towards this vision of trails for everyone forever. So with that, let's dive into why we're all here today. While I know that Washington, D.C. can seem miles, universes away when we're in the backcountry, the decisions that are made there can be felt all the way down to our trails. Tonight, we're here to talk about the federal funding and staffing crisis that's putting our public lands in jeopardy, and really offer some ways that together we can help protect these special places and kind of continue to steward and explore them this year and for years to come. In Washington, we have a variety of public lands, and they're managed by various agencies at the state and federal level. Tonight, we're going to share information primarily about the Forest Service and the lands they manage. And the main reason for that is that 65% of public lands in Washington are managed by the Forest Service. So it's where a lot of us spend our time, and therefore it's where a lot of WTA spends its focus, both from an advocacy and a trail maintenance perspective. But I will say that the issues and the impacts that we're going to talk about today will be very similar for our national parks and even our state lands. But for simplicity tonight, we're really going to focus on the forest because we're not able to cover it all in a quick 30 minutes here. So let's take a second and think about how we got here. For decades, the Forest Service has been underfunded and understaffed, all while the number of people out visiting these special places has grown exponentially. So of course that has created some challenges. You can see on the photo here from Trapper Creek, this is a trail that was quickly disappearing before WTA stepped in to help. And unfortunately, this continues to be a common sight across our forests. Managing this vast lands and millions of visitors requires staffing and expertise at every level, from folks building long-term plans about how to manage these spaces to keeping forests healthy and thriving on the ground, from education to cleaning toilets to clearing trails. And for years, the forest has not had the staff or dollars it needs to keep up with the current trail system, to keep it well maintained, to keep it safe and accessible for the demand of visitors today and for generations to come. So that's kind of the where we've been, and I'm going to hand it off to Andrea now, who's going to explain a little bit more about how we've kind of gone from bad to worse. Andrea?
Thanks, Kindra. Again, my name is Andrea Imler, and I'm the Advocacy Director at WTA. And a lot has happened in the past month and a half. And I kind of put on this slide here what we know of as of today. A lot of this is changing almost on a daily basis. So what you might hear about tonight might be different tomorrow. So let's start back in mid-February. Approximately 3,400 Forest Service employees and 1,000 National Park Service employees were fired by the new administration. This was actually the second round of staff reductions for the Forest Service in the past 6 months. Last fall, there was actually the budget crisis that the Forest Service was facing, and they decided to not hire temporary seasonal staff this year. And then there's also a hiring freeze for the remainder of this year for federal agencies. So, for example, when somebody leaves the Forest Service or the Park Service, their positions are not being refilled. With the February firings, the fired employees were what's called probationary employees, meaning they were recently hired or promoted into their positions. And many of these folks had worked at the Forest Service and the Park Service for many years and were excellent employees. And the majority of these folks were the folks we might see out in the field. So they clear trails, they clean campgrounds and bathrooms, they conduct science and research, provide education to wilderness visitors, and many of them help to fight our wildfires. Earlier this month, courts ordered that staff must be rehired by the agencies. And as of today, and even as of this week, we understand that both the Forest Service and the Park Service are rehiring these positions, and people are actually heading back to work locally, which we're really excited about. But there's still a lot of uncertainty due to what's being called upcoming reductions in force. And that's a kind of a technical term, but basically reductions in force is the next step in reducing the number of staff at federal agencies. For the Forest Service and the Park Service, we've heard that this reduction could be around 20% of staff. For the Forest Service, that would look like about 7,000 or more people for them alone. And it could actually include those folks who are hired and then brought back on board this week and this month. We've heard that the reductions in force will begin around in April for the Forest Service and the Park Service, but we also have heard that it will be a longer process and it won't happen all at once like the firings of last month. So we are expecting that the impacts of the reductions in force are going to be pretty significant and very impactful to our public lands and trails in Washington State. But it still remains to be seen what exactly that looks like. So what does this look like in reality? There was a lot of cloudiness to this due to, there still is a lot of cloudiness due to the upcoming reductions in force and the fact that staff have been brought back on very recently. And so I am providing two examples of how this looked most recently with the recent firings, and then what we could maybe expect with the reductions in force. And I decided to choose two of our local forests, the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest and the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. So starting with the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest, it is the most visited national forest in the country. It gets about 2 million visits per year. And with the recent firings and then those seasonal layoffs I talked about earlier, the forest lost about 70% of their recreation staff. And so that meant there were around 16 people left to manage and care for 280 recreation sites. Recreation sites are things like trailheads, campgrounds, day use sites, boat launches, and 1,500 miles of trail. And then for the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, they're also one of the most visited forests in the nation. The forest is fairly significant in size with 3.8 million acres, and it spans 180 miles from the Canadian border down to the Goat Rocks Wilderness on the east side of the Cascades. And notably, they have about 1,300 miles of wilderness trails. So when the Forest Service firings happened, they were basically left with no trails or wilderness crews to manage much of their forest, including the enchantments. And this also included a loss of their staff who took care of their stock. And those are the folks who help to, with mules and horses, carry out gear, supplies, wildfire fighting equipment, and they also help WTA carry out our week-long trail work parties by carrying our gear out to where we're going to be. And so while we don't really know what the reductions in force will look like on the ground yet, we will probably see how this plays out like in the next month or so. And even though those fired staff were brought back, this snapshot, which was just what we had in reality like a week ago, is what we could be facing again in the future. And even then, the temporary seasonal staff that I mentioned earlier, they still won't be around this summer. And coming up in a bit, we'll talk more about what that will look like and mean for hikers and WTA. And I'll also touch on how you can help as well. But before I do that, I wanted to also provide a little quick look at what's happening at the state level. And while we're really focused here at the federal public lands, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the state, because right now it's a very busy time with the state legislative session happening. And this year is a very important year at the state legislature because they are working on developing our budgets that will last for the next 2 years and keep our state moving forward. And unfortunately, it's also a very tough legislative session due to the state having a funding gap that's estimated to be about 12 billion to 15 billion over the next 4 years. And so while we're focusing on the Forest Service and the impacts there, we're likely also going to see some impacts for our state lands that are managed by Washington State Parks, the Department of Natural Resources, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And that could look like funding reductions that could mean staffing and program cuts. And while we won't know for sure until the end of the legislative session, which is near the end of April, how this will shape up. What we do know right now is that proposed budgets have come out, and we do see that there are some reductions that these agencies would be facing. So, what is WTA doing then for the state this year? Last week, we had a really exciting hiker rally day. This photo is actually taken last week. It was a nice sunny day down in Olympia, and we had more than 150 advocates join us to speak up for funding of our state lands and trails. And I just wanted to give a shout out if you were there. Thank you so much for being there. And our main legislative priority this session is to really, and what our advocates helped us with last week, is to really help keep a priority that WTA had stemming back from 2022, in that we were successful along with other nonprofit partners and legislators and our Trail Action Network in helping to advocate for additional funding for Washington State Parks, the Department of Natural Resources, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife for their recreation lands maintenance backlog. And this is one of the items this year that could be facing cuts. So it's very important that we were down in Olympia advocating for that funding. And we'll see how it goes by the end of April. So as Kindra mentioned earlier, Washington Trails Association, we work day in and day out to help keep our public lands and trails protected and funded and stewarded. And our advocacy team tackles a lot of different policy and funding issues at kind of all levels, federal, state, and local. But we really can't do it alone. And we are just so much more powerful when we all come together to combine our voices. And I wanted to provide an example of that that actually had to do with the recent Forest Service firings, and that we have a Trail Action Network that's encompassed of 68,000 folks that we alert to emerging issues that come up and ask them to take action. And so when the Forest Service firings took place last month, we activated that action network, and more than 7,400 Trail Action Network members sent more than 22,000 emails to their members of Congress, which is just amazing. That kind of blew our last record for number of emails sent out of the water, and was pretty exciting to see everybody really step up and help speak out about this. And then we also had an advocacy team member in Washington, D.C. last month, and he was actually able to visit with our congressional offices and use this example and talk to them about how important federal lands are based off of how many people took action with our action alert. And our members of Congress really do take notice of this. And due to all the attention from WTA and from the public and other organizations, congressional offices were hearing a lot from folks. And we actually saw 10 members of our Washington congressional delegation sign and send a letter to the Secretary of Agriculture asking the administration to withdraw the Forest Service staff terminations, which is just incredible. And I just want to give a shout out if you took part in that action. Thank you so much for doing so. And so WTA will continue to fight against efforts to dismantle public lands agencies. We're really concerned about what this could look like for the future of public lands. We've heard rumors of like efforts to sell off or privatize public lands. We know there's legislation that's been introduced to make it easier to do so. And then we've also seen executive orders from the administration that increases the possibility of excessive resource extraction efforts that may negatively impact public lands and trails. And we expect to hear more about these efforts and others in the coming months. We've seen this all before, and WTA will do what it can to push against this and to make sure that public lands stay in the public's hands and that your efforts won't be affected. Your efforts to get outside this summer won't be affected by this. We're going to keep talking to our members of Congress so they know how important trails and public lands are for all of us. And this is where you could come in. If you've already joined our Trail Action Network, thank you so very much. And if you have yet to do so, I put a link on this slide. Please consider doing so today. By joining our Trail Action Network, we send out emails, not too frequently, but when things are emerging and important for you to hear about. So you too can have a voice in speaking up for public lands and trails. And we make it easy for you to do so. We provide you with what you need. And your voice is really needed now more than ever as we continue forward. So we can't do this work without you, and our elected officials listen, and we'll hope you join us on our Trail Action Network. And I'll turn it back to Kindra.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I appreciate all of the information and the efforts that you and the whole advocacy team have been putting forward through this work. So it's so appreciated. Thank you. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about what this all might mean for hikers on trail this summer. And of course, as Andrea mentioned in her presentation, things are changing rapidly, so there's still a lot of unknowns. And as we talk to the Forest Service, we know that folks are still trying to figure out what to do with the limited resources they have left. So we're still waiting on some specifics, but we have heard that it's potential that even the first round of trail closures could be announced the end of this week or beginning of next week. So while we don't know the wheres, we do know some of the what's. And so I want to take just a little bit of time to talk about that. And again, this is based kind of on the analysis of the firings that happened and the kind of upcoming potential reduction in force. So what we know is there's going to be ranger stations that are closed or that have much reduced hours. Locking gates is a management tool that has been used in the past and will likely be used again. So it's going to be super important before you go out, do your research, check recent trip reports, look at WTA's hiking guide, where we're working to actively ensure that we have everything as up to date as possible. We know that with the loss of Forest Service trail crews, those trails aren't getting the spring cleaning that they often get. So nobody's clearing out the downed trees or really focused on the washed out trails right now. So really, again, do your research, be prepared, have the 10 essentials, have a plan B. So if you get to a trailhead and it is either closed or it doesn't look passable or like a fun day, kind of know where you can go next. We are also potentially seeing a lot of locked bathrooms and no trash cans at the trailhead. This requires staffing to both clean and stock trailheads and take the trash away. So this is a place where it's going to be really important for all of us to do our part, leave it better than we found it. If you pack trash out, take it all the way home. Don't play the trash can Jenga where you think you can put like one more thing on top. It's really a chance to kind of go from leave no trace to leave no trace 201 and take that trash all the way home. make things a little bit better. We also know that there's a potential for emergency response times to be slower, while search and rescue in Washington State are amazing folks that are nonprofit entities. Some of the coordination and early detection is often from the Forest Service staff, wilderness rangers, and with less staff on the ground, there's definitely going to be felt in sort of how responses happen. So please, the most important thing you pack with you is your brain. Make good choices, be prepared, and really be considerate of the risks that you're taking out there. And then lastly, I think it's important to know that with all of this changing information and with trails looking and feeling a little bit different this year, it's important to remember that we're all in this together, that we get a lot of visitors from out of state. We get folks who weren't smart enough to come to this webinar to learn all this handy information. So not everyone's going to have all the information, and the information is going to change. So this is really going to be a year where we need to look out for each other, pack our patience, and kind of help each other out on trail and then help each other off trail. So if you go out and you learn something about a trail, does it have a tree down? Is the parking lot gated? Share that back with the WTA community by writing a trip report, really letting folks know what's happening so that collectively we can be each other's eyes and ears on the ground this summer and really help all of us have the best season that we can. And like I said, while we don't have all of the information, we will, of course, continue to update blogs, hiking guides, our TAN members as we get more. So in addition to the advocacy work that Andrea talked about, WTA is also known for our on-the-ground trail work. And so I'm going to hand it over to Jen now to talk about WTA's trail season, how we're being affected by all of this, and what we're doing to try and fill some of the gaps that are being left with these staffing cuts. Jen, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Kindra. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jen Gradisher. I use she, they pronouns. I am the Trail Program Director for WTA, which means I oversee our statewide trail maintenance work, including our professional trail crew programs, our volunteer programs, youth and adult. Just this evening, I wanted to set a little bit of context around how we fund and prioritize our trail work. So just context-wise, WTA builds and maintains trails on public lands across the state. We work anywhere from local state parks, so thinking about city ofs, county of parks, all the way up to our federal lands partners, national parks, Forest Service, groups like that we've been talking about this evening. So all levels of government. We are funded in addition to the donations that you may help to contribute to WTA. We are also funded by a series of contracts and agreements that we hold with our agency partners, and as well as grants that we do receive for our trail work. We prioritize our work through annual and ongoing conversations with our land manager partners to determine when and where we work. We share our priorities that we receive from our WTA community, and we speak to the agencies about what priorities they have, and then continue to build our schedules with that in mind. In 2024, just a quick snapshot. This is pretty much what our annual average is looking like these days for the amount of volunteers who come out to support our work and the amount of hours that they help to contribute. We average around 3,400 volunteers annually. Many of you who are on the line who have come out to volunteer with us, who support over 158,000 hours of trail work annually, 127,000 of which is with our volunteers. That difference is made up by staff time and programs that we have, such as our professional trail crew, which is all staff. In turn, that equates to $4.26 million in donated labor that we were able to contribute back to federal lands, public lands across the state in 2024. And just to share, that is not income that WTA receives. That is all given back to public lands across the state. So an incredible amount of contribution that we are able to support annually. In context to our federal land partners, on average, every year we contribute about 44% of our trail work is on federal Forest Service or National Park Service projects, and then the rest is made up with those local and state entities. All right, so just to, again, make sure we're all clear on what the current landscape is, as you've been hearing this evening, how this impacts our trail work season ahead. We are seeing on the ground, of course, reduction in staffing due to hiring freezes with our federal partners. What that equates to for our work is lack of folks to coordinate with on the ground for the work that we do, lack of critical knowledge held by our partners at these agencies who have been there for many, many years, lack of critical support like the PAC stock that Andrea mentioned earlier, all of which have been impacted due to these budget cuts and hiring freezes. One thing I didn't mention yet is that we do not do any of our work without the approval of our agency partners and with ongoing coordination, as I said, with those agency partners. So without these folks, it does impact the work that we are able to put out there. So that is part of what we are grappling with. In addition, we are also dealing with a lot of frozen and retracted federal funding. So again, 44% of our work is done on federal lands. That is also similar to the amount of revenue that we pull in for our trail maintenance budget. About 44% of that revenue is tied to federal funding that we receive. So without that funding, we are looking at a pretty big gap in what we are able to do to help supplement their work and our capacity out on trails. In addition to the federal landscape, as Andrea also mentioned, there is uncertainty at the state level. We're also monitoring what that means for the local level as well, too. An example of which is the King County levy renewal that is coming up. That helps to fund our maintenance work here and our trail maintenance work here in King County. So at all levels of government, we're seeing that uncertainty, of course, most significantly at the federal level. Okay, so what are we doing in this landscape to help make sure that we can continue to work out there on trail? Well, for the first thing that we are kind of analyzing is just that federal funding piece and how that is able to support our work getting out there. And so each day we are learning what that does or doesn't mean for the work that we had predicted this summer and that we will continue to monitor. So we are hearing movements on our agreements and contracts that may have been previously frozen. We're also still hearing about places where our agreements may be frozen and that funding might not be able to support our work. So we are building in a timeline to which we are postponing our federal work, most of which is the bulk of that is our day work party schedule that we are postponing really until June on Forest Service lands and federal lands, and supplementing with local and county park projects, state park projects that we have already planned. So still planning to do a whole lot of work with the Forest Service as we're able to this season, but really kind of buying us a little bit more time so that we can make sure we're building the best program that we have. We are also pausing seasonal hiring. So much of that funding that we receive does impact the seasonal staff that we are able to bring on board to support not only our volunteer events that they help to lead, but also for our professional trail crew. And all of which, like I said, is due to those reductions in funds. Contingency planning, we're looking at ways to still make a Forest Service and federal lands schedule happen that does not put a lot of stress on the remaining staff members who might be there for those agencies. So looking at ways to reevaluate where our projects might be going and our crews might be going so that we're not needing to use stock support. We're not needing to depend on the agency to do a lot of things to help get us out on trail, and that we can really be the most flexible with what we're able to provide. So for those of you who are currently signed up for backcountry trips, we are still going forth with those plans as we have been making them, and we will communicate as much in advance as we can if there are any changes to those projects. Again, we're also looking at what it means to have a reduction in staff and how that relates to risk management that we think about as we send people and crews out on trail. So again, acknowledging that a reduction in emergency services is something that we want to be really mindful of, and the responsiveness if something were to happen on trail. If you come out with a WTA, you may have heard on trail that safety is our #1 concern. So we are absolutely thinking about that as we think about sending those crews out into especially the backcountry areas of our work. Despite all of those, we are definitely still planning, like I said, for a great season ahead. We have been able to get up to 2 professional crews. We were aiming for 3 and had been planning for 3. With changes in recent funding, we've been able to open up and make sure that we have 2 crews hired for the season. We are also planning our multi-day trip schedule, which includes 10 adult volunteer vacations, which are week-long trips that folks can sign up for that are either front country or back country, and then over 70 backcountry response teams, which are anywhere from 3 to 8 day self-supported trips with our volunteer community. We are not doing youth week-long trips this summer as we kind of reevaluate what the future of that work really looks like on a multi-day scale for our youth programming, but we are still offering a robust youth and adult day work party schedule for volunteers statewide. So you can, if you have youth out on trail or youth who want to get out who are age 10 and up, go ahead and check out our website and you'll be able to see more of those opportunities throughout multiple regions throughout the state. And then if trail work is not for you, have no fear. We have additional ways that you can volunteer here at WTA, a few of which I have listed on the screen here. Help programs behind the scenes. We have a lot that goes into the back end of our work for the trail work side of things, including tool maintenance, sharpening, working at our packing facility in North Bend, Washington, to help get our multi-day trips out into the field. And then also for our outdoor leadership training program, which is not a trail maintenance program, but it is a very important program that helps get community groups outdoors. There are gear libraries that we have, a couple of those that you can help to support as well. There's ambassador work, so you can become an ambassador, outreach volunteers who serve as the face of WTA at events in their communities across the state. Really exciting, coming up soon. We have a lot of outreach and ambassador work taking place at Ancient Lakes, which is a Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife site. And then additionally, you can help our communications work that we do, help write for our hiking guide or magazine. If you have other questions around volunteering or want to learn more, you can visit WTA.org/volunteer to learn more. I believe I'm handing it back to you, Kindra. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jen. And as you can kind of see from the amount of pieces that Jen shared there, volunteers do incredible work at WTA sort of across all of our programs. But it's also a case where volunteers can't do it all, that we really rely on our Forest Service partners to offer technical expertise in the planning, the authorization to really do the work, like Jen said, that they really have the authority to kind of decide what type of trail work gets done and what's appropriate. And then there's a lot that goes into it where volunteers do a lot of great things, but we can't do it all. And volunteers definitely aren't free, but they do make our dollar go a lot farther, as Jen showed you with those amazing donated labor numbers. So thank you, Jen, for giving us those great insights and for sort of leading us down the how folks can help path. I'm going to reiterate a couple of things and offer a few more kind of ways that you all can help right now, because this is definitely a community effort where it's all of us coming together to make sure that trails and public lands continue to be around. So first, as I said before, leave it better than you found it. We are all visitors on the homelands of the indigenous tribes of the Pacific Northwest who still have reserved rights to these lands. So please treat these places with the respect they deserve. That means take your trash with you, stay on trail, really minimize your impact, and really think about what it means to be a respectful visitor in these places. Write a trip report, share your information. Not only is trip reporting a great way to capture all your summer adventures, but really our trip reporters are our eyes and the ears on the ground, both for WTA and honestly for land managers. It lets us know what you're seeing on trails so that we can plan accordingly. Writing a trip report is super easy. You create a My Backpack account, and then just a couple of clicks about what you're seeing on trail, how were the road conditions, maybe a photo to help paint a picture, and you can really help someone make a difference, both in whether or not they decide that this is a hike for them, or helping WTA and land management agencies plan for our season and seeing what needs the most support. So if you've use trip reports. If you've thought about trip reporting, now's the year. This is an opportunity to really help out with a few easy clicks. And the Trailblazer app makes it even easier because you can pull all your photos straight from your phone, which I love. So shout out to the Trailblazer app. As Andrea mentioned, our advocates have been so essential to the work that we've been doing the last couple of months. If you're not a member of the Trail Action Network, now's the time to join. Not only do you get great updates about what's happening, but we have really seen the collective power of hikers here and the ability for us to move the needle on some of these things. So please continue to engage, sign up, and help us continue to be a strong voice for trails in Olympia, in DC. WTA really and our community have amazing potential, and we've done so much together. We've got so much more to do. Volunteer. Jen sort of went over a bunch of this, but here's my pro tip. If you want to join a work party and it's got a wait list, sign up anyway. I've had like over 80% success rates of getting off the wait list when I go to join. So don't be discouraged, or use it as an opportunity to maybe check out a different part of Washington that you haven't explored yet. No matter where you go, the 3 rules are safety, fun, and work. And it's just a great way to meet new folks across the state, check out a new area, and truly give back. And in addition to trail work, as Jen mentioned, we've got some great trailhead ambassador opportunities coming up. I think we're starting at Ancient Lakes pretty soon because it is starting to be spring. I'm seeing flowers in the trip reports. I'm also seeing ticks in the trip reports. Sorry. But join us at Ancient Lakes and help us work with Department of Fish and Wildlife to really welcome folks and share with hikers how they can be the best stewards of these places coming up this season. And then last, but certainly not least, as I mentioned, all of this work is thanks to all of your support already. So to those who have been a member of WTA already, thank you so much. We appreciate the support. If you have not yet joined, please consider doing so. If you are a member and you are able to make an extra gift, it is most appreciated. Potentially consider switching to a monthly donation, or you can, I know lots of employers in Washington have matching benefits, so there's lots of other ways that you can give as well. If you are able to do so, we certainly appreciate it. And with over 56% of our funding coming from members like you, it really does make a difference on how much we can do. Okay, and with that, first of all, shout out to my co-presenters who have kept us directly on schedule, 7:15 on the dot, nicely done. I know there's a lot of questions and folks are kind of wanting to learn more. So I'm going to ask Andrea and Jen both join me here, and we're going to move over to the question and answer section. I think we're going to start with some that we got earlier in the conversation and go from there. Let me just pull up the questions real quick here. All right, I think we're going to start here with a question for you, Jen, around why trails are being closed if they could remain open and unmaintained.
Sure, great question. So land managers have historically opened or closed trails for many reasons, often because of safety concerns, examples of which are active wildfire response, search and rescue operations, things of that nature. It's not clear exactly what might happen in the coming season, which is why we're recommending that everyone go prepared for the unexpected this season, especially with more than 4,000 trails across the state to explore.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, and this is really one of those places where, sometimes we're asked to do things that feel inconvenient, but are really about the collective good. There's a lot less folks that can help out on the ground right now. And so the more that we can be kind and help them, I think the better it's going to make everything for everyone. Andrea, I got a question here about if you have to live in Washington to be part of our Trail Action Network.
That's a great question. And we actually took a look at this with that recent Forest Service firings action alert that I was mentioning earlier. You don't technically need to live in Washington State, but I will say that a lot of our information is focused on Washington State. But we actually did have people from around the country take that federal Forest Service firings action alert, and then what you get is basically a template letter, and you could modify it. So the answer is you don't have to live in Washington State. It's often more geared towards Washington State, but you can sign up if you would like to.
Thanks, Andrea. I know my folks in California are signed up and they always appreciate the little prompts. So I just want to take a second here and say thank you. It looks like we've had someone donate through the QR code already, which is amazing. So thank you so much for that. That's really cool to see. Love it in real time here. All right, Jen, we're going to hop back to you here and talk a little bit about how can backpackers adjust their trip plans and their expectations in order to reduce trail overuse, kind of during peak hiking season. Like, what are some of the considerations when accessing trailheads when the park's closed?
Yeah, so I think to kick things off, really thinking about utilizing resources, as we've mentioned, like our Trailblazer app and hiking guide, to think about alternative options for popular trails and recreation sites to really help disperse that use. And so you can find like hikes sometimes listed within our hiking guide that can provide you a similar experience than you might be seeking on a trail that might not be as popular or highly used. Being prepared for potential closures at trailheads and always have a plan B in mind in case you experience closures or overcrowding at trailheads upon arrival. It's not uncommon to arrive at a place and not find a place to park at a trailhead, so I want to be really mindful of that, of being respectful of what restrictions might be in place, especially around parking. Also, just being respectful of the closures in general and thinking about what limited resources and capacity may be available to respond to those locations from agency and partner groups. So again, thinking about places if you are going behind gates that may be locked, we do not encourage that whatsoever, especially when those closure signs can be very important to take note of. You can look at our hiking guide for updates on specific trails as a resource to think about where those closures might be, pending that we've gotten those updates provided to us.
Great. Thanks so much, Jen. And I will say that we have a couple of folks that work really hard to keep those updates and closure and condition information all the time. It's real people really looking at trip reports, talking to land management folks. So all of you can help again by writing trip reports. But of course, check out the website for the most up-to-date information. All right, I think next we're gonna go ahead and Andrea, we're gonna go to you for a question. We've got folks that are wondering if we're working with other conservation groups or kind of what sort of volunteer work we're doing to coordinate outreach efforts at trailheads across the state.
Sure. We've been doing quite a bit of work in working with other organizations and agencies on doing outreach at trails and trailheads around the state. The past few summers, WTA has been partnering with some organizations like Mountains of Sound Greenway and Conservation Northwest and Glacier Peak Institute in an effort to provide ambassadors at a variety of trailheads around the state. And then we've also been working with, as Kindra mentioned, the Department of Fish and Wildlife to do some outreach at ancient lakes this year, as well as the Forest Service and Leave No Trace And while we're still finalizing our plans for this summer, for like what trailheads we'll be at, we do know that we're going to be talking to hikers down at the Columbia Gorge, at Lake 22, the Big Four Ice Caves, and Maple Pass, just to name a few. We're still trying to button up our schedule for this summer.
Awesome, thank you. And don't forget Ancient Lakes, we're going to be there explicitly, and we still have room for folks to sign up to volunteer there as well. So, all right, Jen, we've got a question here around how much flexibility WTA has when we're selecting sort of where to work and what trails, and how much that coordination actually takes with our federal partners.
Yes. All right. Let me make sure I'm unmuted. There it is. All right. So we are able to bring priority trails our community would like to see maintained to the table of discussions with land managers, but we never work on a trail or project without direct approval from those agency partners. So we really like to strike a balance between ensuring we're supporting our agency partners to the best of their ability while balancing the interests of our community. And really want to give a shout out to the trip reports that we do receive. It is a great resource for us as a trail maintenance program to take a look at what are some of those on the ground maintenance needs that hikers might be seeing out on trail. It's also a really great resource for our agency partners to look to help prioritize those projects. So we try to really make sure that we're able to be that asset to our partners as much as we can be.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. So we've got a question here that I'm going to take a crack at around kind of to what extent has WTA pivoting its fundraising efforts as sort of a result of the current reality? Well, I want to start by just again, thanking everyone who has donated to WTA recently. We've seen an amazing sort of outshow of support from our existing members, from new folks who really care about the sort of protection and continued access of our public lands. So it's a really exciting opportunity to sort of see that energy coming, and really it's allowed us to lean in and do more of the work that we could continue to do around being a voice for hikers, and really focus with that energy, both in dollars and in the voices we've raised. We're also looking at grants and foundations. We've definitely seen some places where, particularly when it's tied to federal funding, we've had about $85,000 in grants paused. So we're kind of holding our breath a little bit on some of that, but on the other side, we are seeing some funders really wanting to step up. So at this point, we are really seeing people like all of you respond. And so a big thank you to that. And we'll kind of continue to look at what avenues are available as WTA continues to really work to be a voice for hikers and be a solution and a stopgap on the ground as well. So we are definitely pursuing new opportunities, and reach out if you know of some. So, all right, let's see what else do we have here that folks have been wanting to know about. Andrea, we've got folks who are curious about what sort of feedback you're hearing from members of Congress.
Yeah, that's another great question. So we've actually had some really great conversations. I mentioned earlier about how we had a staff member in Washington D.C. who met with our congressional offices, and that they also a great number of them wrote a letter to the Secretary of Agriculture. What we've also been seeing are our congressional members and their offices really reaching out to better understand what the situation is and what the impacts are that we're hearing about. So kind of impacts from on the ground, but also the impacts that we've been talking about of how WTA has been directly affected. And so they've done a couple meetings and roundtables. And so it's really helped to give them a better picture of how they can be helpful in the efforts around our public lands. And so I think we're going to see that continue, and we'll continue our work to make sure we reach out to them and keep them updated.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Andrea. That's great. I've got a sort of follow-up question to the fundraising one. If we have any upcoming events, shout out to our board member who I believe may have planted this question. Thank you, Chris. But we do have an amazing event coming up that is a partnership with the Northwest Symphony called Crescendo. And I'm sure that one of my helpers will put a link in the follow-up email inviting you to join us. But this is an amazing opportunity to hear some remarkable music, donate a little bit of money to trails, and see some beautiful photos that are submitted through the Northwest Exposure Photo Contest. So thank you, Chris, for reminding me to do a plug. I appreciate that. Jen, I've got a question for you here around if companies could sponsor a day of volunteer work on Forest Service land.
Potentially. I love the interest. We may be limited by the capacity of our Forest Service partners, as we've discussed. But if your company is interested in sponsoring a work party, which starts at gifts of $2,500 and up, please respond to the follow-up email that you'll receive after this presentation.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jen. If you have never joined a WTA work party before and are sort of feeling the itch now, there's no experience necessary. We provide all the tools and the training. As Jen mentioned, our 3 rules are safety, fun, and then get some work done. And it really is a great way to give back. It feels very satisfying at the end of the day. So if you're thinking about it, please sign up and join us. We'd love to have you. I think we've got time for one more question here. Let me see if we've got something that's rising in the hopper. Okay. I think we're gonna close it out here. Andrea, with you, what is the sort of piece that folks should really look forward to? Like, what's next? What are we expecting? And what is the sort of way that folks should be primed to help back out?
Yeah, I really do think it's looking for the opportunities of how you can really give your voice and lend a hand. Those 5 tips that Kindra mentioned earlier. I know for advocacy, joining our Trail Action Network is really impactful in that we can provide you with the tools you need to make your voice heard. We also have on our website a toolkit for advocacy that can give you a number of ways that you can talk to your elected officials. It'll provide you with information on how to write, letters to the editor and a bunch of different things, because I think what we're seeing will continue. And so it's going to take all of us together to really make a difference and make sure that our voices are heard in support of public lands and trails.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrea. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate you both sort of spending some time with us. And of course, thank you to all of you who signed on tonight to learn a little bit more about what to expect this summer and how to help out. The coolest thing about WTA is that it's a community and that it's all of us coming together. So whether you're a member, a trip reporter, a volunteer, an advocate, or just getting started and kind of figuring out where you want to plug in, thank you for taking the time to learn more. We're so appreciative and so excited for this season ahead. And we look forward to seeing you on trail. Take care, everybody, and have a great night.